The Listener, Part 1, The Archive. You find the first tape on a Thursday afternoon in late October, buried in a cardboard box labeled MISC, 1980 71989 in the basement of the County Historical Society. The box smells of mildew and old newsprint. Your fingers are already gray with dust when you lift out the cassette, its label written in careful blue ink. Interview, E. Voss, March 14, 1988. You're not looking for this. You're supposed to be cataloging photographs of the old railway station for a digital archive project, something to justify the grant money that keeps this place open 3 days a week. But the woman who runs the society, Mrs. Herrera, mentioned that they had boxes from the defunct local newspaper, and you've always been drawn to voices from the past. Something about the permanence of them, the way they outlast the people who made them. The tape player you find upstairs still works, surprisingly. You thread the cassette in and press play, expecting static or silence or maybe a few seconds of garbled sound before the magnetic ribbon reveals its age. Instead, you hear breathing, then a voice, male, slightly nasal. This is Dennis Kowalski, reporting for the Millbrook Register. It's March 14th, 1988. I'm here with Alina Voss, who has agreed to speak with me about the disappearance of her daughter, Cassandra Voss. Mrs. Voss, thank you for sitting down with me. A pause, then another voice, quieter, older. I don't know what good it will do. You stop the tape. The Historical Society is empty except for Mrs. Herrera, who is upstairs at the front desk doing a crossword puzzle. Through the small basement window, you can see the feet of pedestrians passing on the sidewalk above, the hem of someone's coat, the wheels of a stroller. It's 3:15 in the afternoon. Outside, Millbrook continues its ordinary Thursday. You rewind the tape and listen again. Part 2, The Register. The Millbrook Register ceased publication in 1994, a casualty of consolidation and the internet's slow encroachment on small-town journalism. You learn this from Mrs. Herrera when you bring the tape upstairs and ask her about Dennis Kowalski. Oh, Dennis, she says, not looking up from her crossword. He covered everything back then. School board meetings, car accidents, the occasional human interest piece. This was before my time here, but I remember him. Tall fellow, always wore a tie even in summer. He moved to Phoenix in the 90s. Cancer got him, I think, around 2010. You ask her about Cassandra Voss. Mrs. Herrera sets down her pen. She's in her 60s with reading glasses on a beaded chain and a cardigan despite the stuffy warmth of the building. That was a sad business, she says. Before my time in Millbrook, too. I moved here in '92, but people still talked about it when I arrived. The girl who disappeared. What happened to her? No one knows. She went missing in the winter of '88, February, I think. They searched for weeks, never found a trace. You ask if there was an investigation. Of course, the police did what they could, but this was a small town and it was a long time ago. Eventually, people moved on, or tried to. She looks at the cassette in your hand. Is that an interview about her? You nod. Well, Mrs. Herrera says, you might want to look through the rest of those newspaper boxes. Dennis was thorough. If he made one tape, he probably made others. You spend the rest of the afternoon in the basement. The boxes are poorly organized, filled with yellowed clippings, old photographs, reporters' notebooks with cramped handwriting, and more cassettes. You find 3 more tapes labeled with dates from March and April of 1988, all marked with variations of Voss case. By the time you finish cataloging them, the Historical Society is closing. Mrs. Herrera lets you check out the tapes and a portable cassette player. She doesn't ask why you want them, and you don't explain. You're not sure you could. That evening, in your apartment above the coffee shop on Main Street, you make tea and sit by the window. The streetlights are coming on. A few cars drift past. Millbrook at dusk feels like a place where nothing ever happens, which you know isn't true but also isn't entirely false. You've lived here for 8 months, took the archivist job because it was quiet and far from the city, and because you needed distance from everything you'd left behind. You press play on the first tape again and listen to Alina Voss describe the last time she saw her daughter. Part 3, February 1988. Cassandra Voss was 17 years old when she disappeared. She was a senior at Millbrook High School, a B student, quiet but not withdrawn. She sang in the choir and worked part-time at the public library shelving books. On Saturday, February 13, 1988, she told her mother she was going to study at her friend Jennifer's house. She left around 2 in the afternoon. She never arrived at Jennifer's. She was never seen again. Alina Voss's voice on the tape is measured, as though she's reading from a script she's been forced to memorize. She describes what Cassandra was wearing: jeans, a blue sweater, a gray winter coat, white sneakers. She describes Cassandra's backpack, dark green canvas with a small pin of a cat on the strap. She describes calling Jennifer's house at 7 that evening, learning that Cassandra had never shown up, calling everyone she could think of before finally calling the police. "They told me to wait 24 hours, Alina says. They said she was probably with a boyfriend or at a party. They said girls that age run off sometimes, but I knew. A mother knows." Dennis Kowalski's questions are gentle, professional. He asks about Cassandra's friends, her routines, whether there had been any arguments or unusual behavior. Alina answers each question with a quiet patience that suggests she's answered them many times before. "Did Cassandra have a boyfriend?" Dennis asks. "No, not that I knew of. She wasn't interested in that yet. She wanted to go to college. She wanted to study music." "Did she ever talk about leaving Millbrook?" "All the time. She wanted to see the world, but not like that, not without telling me." There's a silence on the tape, just the faint hiss of the recording. Then Dennis asks, "Do you think she's still alive?" Alina takes a long breath. "I don't know. Some days I think she has to be. Other days I think I would feel it if she were gone, but I don't feel anything, just empty." You stop the tape and look out the window. Across the street, the bakery is closing, the owner pulling down the metal gate. A couple walks past, holding hands, their breath visible in the cold. You think about Alina Voss in 1988, sitting across from a reporter, trying to put her grief into words that might somehow bring her daughter back. You think about how it didn't work. Part 4, the second interview. The second tape is dated March 28, 1988. This time, Dennis Kowalski is interviewing Jennifer Hartley, Cassandra's friend. Jennifer's voice is young, nervous. She speaks quickly, as though afraid she'll forget something important. "We were supposed to study for the history test," Jennifer says, "but Cass never showed up. I called her house around 4 to see if she was coming, but no one answered. I just figured she'd forgotten or something came up." Dennis asks if Cassandra had seemed troubled or distracted in the days before she disappeared. "Maybe a little," Jennifer says, "but not in a bad way. She seemed, I don't know, excited, like she had a secret or something." "What kind of secret?" "I don't know. She wouldn't say. But she kept smiling to herself in class, and once I caught her writing something in her notebook, and she closed it real fast when I looked over. I asked her about it, and she just said it was nothing." You can hear Dennis shifting in his chair. "Did you ever find out what she was writing?" "No, the police took her notebook. I don't know if they found anything in it." Dennis asks about other friends, about whether Cassandra had mentioned meeting anyone new. Jennifer doesn't know. She sounds increasingly upset, her voice tightening. Eventually, Dennis thanks her and ends the interview. You play the tape twice more, listening for details you might have missed. The way Jennifer's voice catches when she talks about the notebook. The long pause before she says Cassandra seemed excited. You wonder what the police found in that notebook. You wonder if it's still in an evidence box somewhere, or if it was returned to Alina Voss, or if it was simply lost in the decades since. Part 5, the reporter's notes. The third tape is different. It's not an interview, but a recording of Dennis Kowalski talking to himself, apparently dictating notes while driving. You can hear the sound of his car engine, the occasional click of a turn signal. April 10th, 1988, he says, following up on the Voss case. Police still have no leads. Detective Marsh told me off the record that they've interviewed over 40 people and haven't found anything useful. The prevailing theory seems to be that Cassandra ran away, but her mother insists she wouldn't have done that. I'm inclined to believe the mother. He pauses. There's the sound of wind through a crack in the window. I drove the route Cassandra would have taken from her house to Jennifer Hartley's today. About 2 miles, mostly residential. There's a stretch along Oakwood Avenue that's pretty isolated, woods on one side, old fence on the other. If someone grabbed her, that's where it would have happened. But there were no witnesses, no signs of a struggle. It's like she vanished. Another pause. I keep thinking about what Jennifer said, about Cassandra seeming excited like she had a secret. What if she was meeting someone? Not a boyfriend necessarily, but someone she didn't want her mother to know about. A teacher, maybe, or someone older, someone she trusted. The recording continues for a few more minutes, Dennis theorizing aloud, circling the same questions with no answers. Then it cuts off mid-sentence, and you're left with silence. You sit with that silence for a while. Outside, the coffee shop below your apartment is closing. You can hear the muffled clatter of chairs being stacked, the low murmur of the staff saying goodnight. You think about Dennis Kowalski driving through Millbrook in 1988, trying to solve a mystery that wasn't his to solve, and you wonder why it mattered so much to him. You wonder why it's starting to matter to you. Part 6, the library. On Friday morning, you go to the Millbrook Public Library. It's a small brick building 2 blocks from the Historical Society, with tall windows and a children's section that smells like crayons and old carpet. The head librarian, a man named Paul Greaves, is in his 70s and has worked here since the 1970s. Mrs. Herrera suggested you talk to him. Paul remembers Cassandra Voss. Sweet girl, he says, very responsible. She started working here her junior year, just a few hours a week after school. She loved books, always had one with her. You ask if he noticed anything unusual about her in the weeks before she disappeared. Paul leans back in his chair, thinking. Not really. She was the same as always, quiet, polite. She did ask me once if we had any books about colleges in other states. I remember because it was specific. She wanted to know about schools in New England. I helped her find a few guides. Did she say why? I assumed she was thinking about where to apply. She was a senior after all. You ask if the police interviewed him. Oh yes, they talked to everyone who knew her. I told them what I just told you. They seemed more interested in whether she'd had any strange visitors or if anyone had been asking about her. But I couldn't help them with that. The library was always busy, lots of people coming and going. Before you leave, Paul shows you the desk where Cassandra used to work. It's in a quiet corner near the reference section, a small wooden table with a rolling cart beside it. You stand there for a moment, trying to imagine her, 17, thoughtful, shelving books and dreaming of New England. Part 7, Oakwood Avenue. That afternoon, you walk the route from Cassandra's house to Jennifer Hartley's. You're not sure what you're looking for. Answers, maybe, or just a sense of the geography, the physical space where a girl vanished. Cassandra's childhood home is a modest 2-story house with blue siding and a maple tree in the front yard. You don't knock on the door. You're not ready to intrude on whoever lives there now. Instead, you start walking the route you've mapped out from the old newspaper articles. The first part of the walk is through a typical suburban neighborhood. Tidy lawns, driveways with basketball hoops, houses with Halloween decorations still up. But after about half a mile, the houses thin out and you reach Oakwood Avenue. This is the stretch Dennis Kowalski mentioned in his notes. The road is narrow and curves gently through a patch of woods. On the left side, there's a chain-link fence, rusted and sagging, separating the road from an overgrown field. On the right, the woods are dense enough that you can't see more than 20 feet in. It's quiet here. No sidewalk, just a narrow gravel shoulder. If you were walking this route on a February afternoon in 1988 and a car pulled over, no one would see you get in. No one would hear you call for help. You walk the length of Oakwood Avenue slowly. It takes about 10 minutes. By the time you reach the other end, where the houses start again, your hands are cold and the sky is turning gray. You think about Cassandra walking this same stretch 36 years ago. You think about how easy it would be to disappear. Part 8, the fourth tape. The fourth tape is dated April 22, 1988. This time, Dennis Kowalski is interviewing a man named Robert Fain, who was Cassandra's music teacher at Millbrook High School. Fain's voice is smooth, confident. He sounds younger than you expected, maybe in his 30s. He speaks warmly about Cassandra. She had a beautiful voice, he says, a natural soprano. She wasn't technically perfect, but she had feeling, you know. She understood the music. Dennis asked if Cassandra had been planning to pursue music in college. I encouraged her to. I wrote her a letter of recommendation for several schools. She was interested in studying vocal performance, maybe becoming a teacher herself one day. Which schools did she apply to? Let's see, I know she applied to Oberlin, and there was one in Vermont, I think. Bennington, maybe. I can't recall all of them. Dennis asks if Fain noticed anything unusual about Cassandra's behavior before she disappeared. Not really. She seemed happy, focused. We had a concert coming up in March and she was practicing hard for her solo. She was supposed to sing a piece from Handel's Messiah. She never got the chance. There's a pause. Then Dennis asks, did you ever meet with Cassandra outside of school? Fain's tone shifts slightly. What do you mean? For extra lessons, anything like that? Oh, no, not formally. Sometimes students would ask me questions after class and I'd help them, but I didn't give private lessons. Did Cassandra ever come to you with personal problems? Another pause. No, she was very private. If she was struggling with something, she didn't share it with me. The interview ends shortly after. You rewind the tape and listen to Fain's answers again, paying attention to the pauses, the slight defensiveness in his voice when Dennis asks about meeting outside of school. It's probably nothing. Teachers are careful about how they talk to the press, especially in cases like this. But something about the interview unsettles you. Part 9, search. You start searching for information about Robert Fain online. It takes a while. Fain is a common enough name and you don't have much to go on. But eventually, you find an obituary from 2003. Robert Fain, former music teacher at Millbrook High School, died at the age of 48 after a brief illness, survived by his wife, Linda, and 2 daughters. The obituary doesn't mention Cassandra Voss. It doesn't mention anything unusual, just a man who taught music for 20 years and was beloved by his students. You dig deeper. Old school records, archived newspapers, anything that might tell you more about Fain or the investigation. You find a brief article from May 1988 in the Register, stating that the police have interviewed Cassandra's teachers and classmates but have no suspects. Fain isn't named specifically, but the article mentions that all school personnel have cooperated fully with the investigation. You wonder if that's true. You wonder what the police asked Fain and what he told them. Part 10, Eleanor. You decide to look for Eleanor Voss. It takes less time than you expected. A quick search of public records shows that she still lives in Millbrook, in a small house on the east side of town. You're surprised by this. Somehow, you assumed she would have left, that staying in the place where her daughter disappeared would be unbearable. You don't call ahead. You're not sure you would know what to say. Instead, on Saturday morning, you drive to her address and sit in your car across the street for 10 minutes, trying to decide if this is a terrible idea. The house is small and neat, with white siding and a front porch decorated with potted mums. There's a car in the driveway, so someone is probably home. You take a breath and get out of the car. Eleanor Voss answers the door on the second knock. She's in her 70s now, with short gray hair and glasses. She's smaller than you imagined, almost frail, but her eyes are sharp. "Can I help you?" she asks. You introduce yourself. Explain that you work at the Historical Society and that you've been listening to the old interview tapes from the register. You say you're sorry to bother her, that you just wanted to ask a few questions if she's willing. Alina looks at you for a long moment, then she steps aside. "Come in." Her living room is tidy and sparsely furnished. There's a couch, a coffee table with a stack of library books, a television. On the mantel above the fireplace, there's a framed photograph of a teenage girl with dark hair and a shy smile. You recognize her from the newspaper articles. Cassandra. Alina offers you tea. You accept, and she disappears into the kitchen while you sit on the couch, feeling like an intruder. When she returns, she sets a tray on the coffee table and pours 2 cups with steady hands. "I haven't thought about those interviews in years," she says. "Dennis Kowalski was a kind man. He really tried to help." You ask if she minds talking about Cassandra. "I don't mind. People stopped asking a long time ago. It's almost a relief when someone remembers." You're not sure where to start, so you ask the most basic question. Does she think Cassandra is still alive? Alina stirs her tea. "No, I used to hope, but I don't anymore. If she were alive, she would have come home, or at least sent word. She wouldn't have let me wonder for this long." "Do you have any idea what happened to her?" "I think someone took her, someone she trusted. She wouldn't have gotten into a car with a stranger. She was smart. She was careful." You ask if the police ever had any suspects. Alina shakes her head. "Not officially. They looked at everyone. Her friends, her teachers, people in town, but they never arrested anyone. After a few months, the case went cold. Every few years, a detective would call and say they were reviewing it, but nothing ever came of it." You hesitate, then ask about Robert Fane. Alina's expression doesn't change. "He was her music teacher. He gave her a lot of encouragement. I was grateful for that." "Did the police interview him?" "I assume so. They interviewed all her teachers." You ask if Cassandra ever mentioned him at home. "Sometimes. She admired him. He made her feel like she had talent, like she could actually have a future in music. But there was nothing inappropriate, if that's what you're asking. I would have known." You're not sure she would have, but you don't say that. Instead, you ask if Alina still has any of Cassandra's belongings. "Some, most of it is in boxes in the attic. I couldn't bring myself to get rid of them. Do you want to see?" You do. Part 11, the attic. Alina's attic is small and stuffy, with slanted ceilings and a single bulb hanging from a wire. There are 3 cardboard boxes stacked in the corner, each labeled Cassandra in faded marker. Alina pulls down the first box and opens it. Inside are clothes folded neatly, sweaters, jeans, a choir robe. The smell of old fabric and dust rises up. She sets it aside and opens the second box. This one contains books, a few stuffed animals, a jewelry box with cheap earrings, and a broken watch. The third box is filled with papers, school assignments, report cards, drawings. Alina lifts out a spiral notebook with a purple cover. "This was her journal," she says. "The police gave it back after they were done with it. I've never read it. I couldn't." She hands it to you. You hold the notebook carefully, aware of its weight, its fragility. The cover is worn, the spiral bent. You open it to the first page. Cassandra's handwriting is round and careful, the letters slanting slightly to the right. September 3, 1987. First day of senior year. Mrs. Patterson assigned a new seating chart in English, and I got stuck next to Brad Thompson, who smells like onions. Jennifer says I should ask to move, but I don't want to make a fuss. You flip through the pages. Most of the entries are mundane. Complaints about homework, observations about friends, plans for the weekend. But as you get closer to February, the tone shifts. The entries become shorter, more cryptic. January 20, 1988. He said I have potential. I didn't know what to say. January 27, 1988. Practice for 2 hours today. I think I'm getting better. He says I am. February 5, 1988. I'm not supposed to tell anyone yet, but I think it's going to happen. I can't believe it. February 11, 1988. 2 more days. I keep thinking about what Mom will say. She'll understand. She has to. The last entry is dated February 12, 1988, the day before Cassandra disappeared. Tomorrow everything changes. I'm scared but also excited. This is what I've been waiting for. You read the entries again, trying to piece together what they mean. Who was he? What was going to happen? Why was Cassandra scared to tell her mother? Alina is watching you. Did you find something? You show her the entries. She reads them slowly, her expression unreadable. When she finishes, she closes the notebook and hands it back to you. I should have read this years ago, she says quietly. Maybe it would have helped. You ask what she thinks the entries mean. I don't know, but she was hiding something. Something she thought was important. You ask if you can borrow the notebook. Alina hesitates, then nods. Just bring it back when you're done. Part 12, Robert Fane's widow. You spend the weekend going through Cassandra's journal, making notes, trying to find patterns. The more you read, the more convinced you become that he is Robert Fane. The timeline matches. Fane was her music teacher, someone who would have been encouraging her, telling her she had potential. And the reference to practicing suggests music. On Monday, you search for Linda Fane, Robert's widow. She still lives in Millbrook, in a house on the north side of town. You send her a letter explaining who you are and asking if she would be willing to talk to you about her late husband and the Voss case. You don't expect a response, but 3 days later she calls you. I got your letter, she says. Her voice is cautious, tired. I don't know what I can tell you. My husband had nothing to do with that girl's disappearance. You say you're not accusing anyone, that you're just trying to understand what happened. You ask if you can meet with her, just for a few minutes. She agrees reluctantly. Linda Fane's house is larger than Alina's, a 2-story colonial with a well-kept lawn. Linda herself is in her late 60s, with dyed blonde hair and a wary expression. She invites you in but doesn't offer tea. My husband was a good man, she says, sitting across from you in the living room. He loved teaching. He loved his students, but that girl's case ruined his life. You ask how. The police questioned him for hours. They searched his car, his office at school. People in town started whispering, saying he must have done something. He didn't. He had nothing to do with it, but the suspicion never went away. It followed him for years. You ask if Robert ever mentioned Cassandra after she disappeared. Of course he did. He was devastated. She was one of his best students. He felt responsible, like he should have seen something, should have known she was in trouble. But he didn't know. None of us did. You ask if Robert ever gave Cassandra private lessons or met with her outside of school. Linda's expression hardens. No, he was very careful about that. He knew how things could look. He never met with students alone, always kept his classroom door open. He was a professional. You thank her for her time and leave. As you walk to your car, you feel the weight of her defensiveness, the way she spoke of her husband in the past tense as though he were still on trial. You wonder if she's telling the truth. You wonder if she knows. Part 13, the last tape. There's one more tape you haven't listened to yet. You found it at the bottom of one of the boxes, unlabeled, the cassette itself cracked along one edge. You've been putting off playing it, not sure what you'll find. Now, alone in your apartment on a cold November evening, you thread the tape into the player and press play. At first, there's only static. Then Dennis Kowalski's voice, quieter than in the other recordings. May 1, 1988. This is for my own records. I've been working the Voss case for 2 months now, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion. Someone in Millbrook knows what happened to Cassandra. Maybe they don't know the whole story, but they know something. A detail, a rumor, a suspicion. And they're not talking. A pause. I've gone through all my interviews. Jennifer Hartley said Cassandra seemed excited, like she had a secret. Alina Voss said her daughter was planning for college, looking forward to the future. Robert Fain said she was focused, happy. But when I listen to these tapes, I hear something else. I hear people who are hiding something. Not necessarily guilt, but knowledge. Something they don't want to admit. Another pause, longer this time. I spoke to Detective Marsh again yesterday. He told me the case is going nowhere. They don't have enough evidence to charge anyone. They don't even have a body. He said I should move on, cover other stories. But I can't. I keep thinking about Alina Voss, about the way she looks at me when I interview her, like she's hoping I'll be the one to find her daughter. I keep thinking about Cassandra, about what her last moments must have been like. Did she know she was in danger? Did she call out for help? Dennis's voice cracks slightly. He clears his throat. I'm going to keep digging, I have to. Someone knows what happened, and I'm going to find them. The tape ends. You sit in the silence that follows, feeling the weight of Dennis Kowalski's determination, his frustration. You think about how he kept searching, kept asking questions, even though it led nowhere. You think about how he eventually left Millbrook, moved to Phoenix, let the case fade into memory. But you're not Dennis Kowalski. You're just an archivist, a stranger to this town and this tragedy. You don't owe Cassandra Voss anything. You could put the tapes back in their box, return the journal to Alina, and go back to cataloging photographs. You could, but you won't. Part 14, The School. Millbrook High School is a sprawling brick building on the west side of town, built in the 1960s and expanded several times since. You go there on a Tuesday afternoon, armed with a vague story about researching local history for the Historical Society. The woman at the front desk directs you to the school library, where the librarian, a cheerful woman named Ms. Patel, helps you find old yearbooks. The 1988 yearbook is thin, with a navy blue cover. You flip through it until you find Cassandra's senior portrait. She's wearing a dark sweater and a small smile, her hair pulled back. Beneath the photo it says, Cassandra Voss, choir library volunteer, future, Oberlin College. You turn to the faculty section and find Robert Fain. He's younger than you imagined, maybe mid-30s, with a neatly trimmed beard and wire-rimmed glasses. He's smiling at the camera. Beneath his photo, Robert Fain, music department, BA University of Michigan. You ask Ms. Patel if she knows anything about the music department in the 1980s. She doesn't. She only started working here 5 years ago. But she suggests you talk to Mr. Graham, a history teacher who's been at the school since the early 80s. Mr. Graham is in his late 60s, with white hair and a stooped posture. He's grading papers in an empty classroom when you knock on the door. He invites you in and listens to your questions with a thoughtful expression. Robert Fain, he says. Yes, I remember him. Good teacher, very dedicated. The students loved him. You ask if he remembers Cassandra Voss. I do, tragic case. We were all questioned by the police. It was a difficult time for the school. You ask if Mr. Graham thought Fain had anything to do with her disappearance. He hesitates. I don't like to speak ill of the dead, but there were rumors. Nothing concrete, just whispers. Some people thought Fain was too close to his students, too friendly. But I never saw anything inappropriate, and the police cleared him. You ask what he means by too close. He spent a lot of time with them, stayed late after school for rehearsals, gave students his home phone number in case they needed help. Some of the other teachers thought it was unprofessional, but Robert was passionate about music. He wanted his students to succeed. Mr. Graham pauses, then adds, I will say this. After Cassandra disappeared, Robert changed. He became more withdrawn, less engaged. Within a year, he'd stopped doing after-school activities. He just taught his classes and went home. It was like the joy had gone out of him. Part 15, The Timeline. You go back to your apartment and spread out everything you've collected. The tapes, the journal, the notes you've made, the photocopies of newspaper articles. You create a timeline, trying to piece together Cassandra's last weeks. January 20, 1988. Cassandra writes in her journal, "He said I have potential." January 27, 1988. Practiced for 2 hours today. I think I'm getting better. He says I am. February 5, 1988. I'm not supposed to tell anyone yet, but I think it's going to happen. February 11, 1988. 2 more days. I keep thinking about what Mom will say. February 12, 1988. Tomorrow everything changes. February 13, 1988. Cassandra tells her mother she's going to Jennifer's house to study. She leaves at 2 p.m. She never arrives. You stare at the timeline. What was going to happen on February 13? What was Cassandra waiting for? And why was she afraid to tell her mother? You think about what Paul Greaves told you at the library, about Cassandra asking for information on colleges in New England. You think about Robert Fane's letter of recommendation for Oberlin. You think about the way Fane's voice shifted when Dennis Kowalski asked if he'd met with Cassandra outside of school. And then you think about something else, something you read in one of the old newspaper articles. In March 1988, the police searched Robert Fane's car and found nothing. They searched his office at the school and found nothing. But they didn't search his home. Linda Fane said they didn't have a warrant for that. You wonder why. Part 16, the archive again. The next morning, you go back to the Historical Society and ask Mrs. Herrera if there are any police records from the Voss investigation. The police wouldn't have given their files to us, she says, but you might try the county clerk's office. Sometimes old case files get transferred there if they're closed. The county clerk's office is in the courthouse, a granite building downtown. The clerk, a bored-looking man in his 40s, tells you that records from the 1980s are in the basement. He gives you a pair of latex gloves and a key to the records room. The basement is cold and smells of paper and mildew. The records are stored in filing cabinets along one wall, organized by year and case number. It takes you an hour to find the Voss case file. When you do, it's thinner than you expected. 12 pages, mostly interview summaries and search logs. You sit on the concrete floor and read through the file. Most of it is familiar. Interviews with Alina Voss, Jennifer Hartley, other students and teachers. But there's one document that catches your attention. A handwritten note dated March 5, 1988, signed by Detective William Marsh. Interviewed Robert Fane again today. He denies any inappropriate relationship with Cassandra Voss, states that he wrote her a letter of recommendation for college and occasionally gave her feedback on her singing after class, but nothing beyond that. When asked about his whereabouts on February 13, he states he was at home with his wife all afternoon. Wife confirms this. No evidence to contradict his statement. Without additional evidence, cannot pursue this line of inquiry further. You read the note 3 times. Fane had an alibi. His wife confirmed it, but something about the note bothers you. The phrase, "cannot pursue this line of inquiry further," sounds like frustration, like Marsh wanted to dig deeper but couldn't. You keep reading. At the bottom of the file, there's a list of items recovered during the investigation. Most of it is routine. Cassandra's backpack, found in the woods near Oakwood Avenue. Her wallet, also found in the woods, empty. A few personal items. But one item stands out. Concert program, Millbrook High School Winter Concert, February 10, 1988. Found in Cassandra Voss's bedroom. You close the file and sit there for a long time, thinking. A concert program from February 10, 3 days before Cassandra disappeared. You wonder if the program is still in Alina's attic in one of those boxes. Part 17, the concert. You call Alina and ask if you can come by again. She says yes. This time when you arrive, she has the 3 boxes waiting for you in the living room. I've been going through them myself, she says. It's strange looking at her things after all these years. It's like she's still 17. You ask about the concert program. Alina nods and pulls it out of the third box. It's a simple folded program, the cover decorated with a clip art image of a treble clef. Inside, there's a list of songs and performers. Halfway down, you see, Come Unto Him from Messiah by G.F. Handel, performed by Cassandra Voss, accompanied by Robert Fain on piano. You stare at the program, accompanied by Robert Fain. You think about Cassandra's journal entries, about practicing for 2 hours, about him saying she was getting better. You think about the timeline, about something happening on February 13, something Cassandra was both excited and afraid to tell her mother. You ask Alina if she went to the concert. Of course, I went to all her concerts. She was wonderful that night. I'd never heard her sing like that. Afterward, Mr. Fain came up to me and said she had real talent, that she could go far if she kept working hard. I was so proud. Did Cassandra seem different that night? Alina thinks. She was nervous before the performance, but that was normal. Afterward, she seemed relieved, like a weight had been lifted. You ask if Fain talked to Cassandra after the concert. I'm sure he did. He talked to all the performers, but I didn't see them together specifically. There were a lot of people backstage. You thank Alina and leave. As you drive back to your apartment, pieces of the puzzle are starting to come together, but you still don't have the full picture. You still don't know what happened to Cassandra Voss. Part 18, the college. That evening, you call Oberlin College. It takes some navigating through the admissions office, but eventually, you're connected to someone in records who's willing to help. You explain that you're researching a cold case from 1988 and that you need to know if Cassandra Voss applied to Oberlin, and if so, whether she was accepted. The woman puts you on hold. When she comes back, she says, yes, Cassandra Voss applied for the fall 1988 term. She was accepted on February 12, 1988. A letter was sent to her home address. February 12, the day before she disappeared, the day she wrote in her journal, tomorrow everything changes. You thank the woman and hang up. You sit at your kitchen table thinking. Cassandra was accepted to Oberlin. That was the secret, the thing she was excited about. She was going to tell her mother on February 13 after she left Jennifer's house, but she never got the chance. Or did she? You think about the journal entry again. I keep thinking about what Mom will say. She'll understand. She has to. Why would Cassandra be worried about her mother's reaction to a college acceptance? Alina seemed supportive of her daughter's dreams. So what was Cassandra afraid of? Unless it wasn't just about the acceptance. Unless there was something else. Part 19, the scholarship. You call Oberlin again the next morning and ask if there's any record of financial aid or scholarships for Cassandra Voss. The woman in records is less helpful this time. That information would be private, she says. I can't release it without permission. You explain that Cassandra is deceased, that this is part of a historical investigation. The woman sighs. Let me check with my supervisor. She puts you on hold for 10 minutes. When she comes back, she says, my supervisor says I can confirm that Cassandra Voss was offered a full scholarship to Oberlin, funded by a private donor. The scholarship was contingent on her enrolling in the music program. Who was the donor? That information is confidential. I'm sorry. You thank her and hang up. A full scholarship from a private donor. Someone who wanted Cassandra to go to Oberlin specifically to study music. Someone who believed in her talent. You think about Robert Fain, about how he encouraged her, how he said she had potential, about how he wrote her a letter of recommendation, about how he accompanied her at the concert. You think about how he had access to resources, connections in the music world, how he could have arranged a scholarship without Cassandra or her mother knowing until the acceptance letter arrived. And you think about what that would mean. about the kind of relationship that would require, about the line between mentorship and something more. Part 20, Linda's Truth. You drive to Linda Fain's house without calling ahead. You're not sure she'll let you in, but you have to try. She answers the door in a bathrobe, her hair uncombed. "You again," she says. "I told you everything I know." "I don't think you did," you say. "I think you know more than you're telling me." Linda's expression hardens. "You need to leave." "Did your husband arrange a scholarship for Cassandra Voss?" Linda goes still. For a moment you think she's going to slam the door. Instead, she steps aside. "Come in." You follow her to the living room. She doesn't sit down. She stands by the window looking out at the street. "Robert didn't do anything wrong," she says finally. "He was trying to help her." "Help her how?" "He saw how talented she was. He knew she came from a family that didn't have much money. He wanted her to have opportunities. So he contacted an old colleague from college, someone who ran a scholarship fund. He arranged for Cassandra to receive a full scholarship to Oberlin." Did Cassandra know? Not until she got the acceptance letter. Robert wanted it to be a surprise. And did Alina know? Linda shakes her head. That was part of the problem. Robert should have told her, but he thought Alina might refuse the scholarship if she knew it came from him. He thought she might see it as charity or worse. Worse? Linda turns to look at you. People talk. They see a male teacher taking an interest in a female student and they assume the worst. Robert knew that. He was trying to be careful, but he cared about Cassandra. He wanted her to succeed. You ask what happened on February 13th. Linda's face crumples. "I don't know. Robert said he was home with me all afternoon, and he was, but Cassandra called the house that morning. I answered. She asked to speak to Robert. She sounded upset. I gave him the phone and he took it into his office. They talked for maybe 10 minutes. When he came out, he looked shaken. He said Cassandra wanted to meet him, that she had something she needed to tell him." Did he go? Linda is crying now silently. "I don't know. He left the house around 1:30. He said he was going to the store. He came back around 4. He didn't have any groceries." You feel a cold weight settling in your chest. "You told the police he was home all afternoon." "I know, I lied. I was scared. I thought if I told the truth, they would arrest him. And he swore to me he didn't hurt her. He said he went to meet her, but she never showed up. He said he waited for half an hour and then came home." Where were they supposed to meet? He didn't tell me. I didn't ask. Part 21, Oakwood Avenue. You leave Linda's house and drive straight to Oakwood Avenue. It's late afternoon, the sky already darkening. You park on the side of the road and walk the same stretch you walked before, the stretch where Cassandra would have been most vulnerable. You think about the timeline. Cassandra left her house at 2 p.m. on February 13. Robert Fain left his house at 1:30. If they arranged to meet somewhere along Oakwood Avenue, somewhere isolated, it would have been easy for them to talk without being seen. But why here? Why not at the school or somewhere public? Unless Cassandra didn't want anyone to see them together. Unless she was afraid of what people would think. You walk slowly, looking at the woods on one side, the overgrown field on the other. The light is fading. You think about Cassandra standing here 36 years ago, waiting for her teacher. You think about what she might have wanted to say to him. And then you see it. A gap in the chain-link fence just wide enough for a person to slip through. Beyond the gap, a narrow trail leading into the field. You hesitate, then step through the fence and follow the trail. The field is overgrown with tall grass and brambles. The trail winds through it for maybe 50 yards before ending at a small clearing. In the center of the clearing, there's an old stone foundation, the remnants of a building long since demolished. You step closer and see something carved into one of the stones. CV plus RF. Your hands are shaking. You pull out your phone and take a picture. Then you call Alina Voss. Part 22, Alina's memory. Alina answers on the third ring. "Hello." It's me, you say. I need to ask you something. Did Cassandra ever mention a place she liked to go? Somewhere private, maybe in a field off Oakwood Avenue. There's a long silence. How did you know about that? I found it. There's a clearing with an old foundation. Someone carved initials into it. Alina's voice is quiet. That was Cassandra's special place. She found it when she was 12 when we first moved to Millbrook. She used to go there to read or think. She called it her secret spot. I only went there once to see what she was talking about. She made me promise not to tell anyone. Did she ever take anyone else there? I don't think so. She was very protective of it. You ask if Robert Fane might have known about it. I don't know, she might have told him. They talked a lot, especially that last year. You thank Alina and hang up. You stand in the clearing as the last light fades, thinking about Cassandra bringing Robert Fane here to her secret place. You think about what she might have wanted to tell him, about the scholarship maybe, about her acceptance to Oberlin, about what it meant to her. Or maybe about something else. Part 23, the letter. You don't sleep that night. Instead, you sit at your kitchen table with Cassandra's journal, reading every entry again, looking for something you missed. And you find it, a loose sheet of paper tucked into the back of the journal, folded small. You unfold it carefully. It's a letter, written in Cassandra's handwriting, undated. Dear Mr. Fane, I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to write it down. I know you arranged the scholarship for me. My mom got a call from Oberlin asking about our financial situation, and when she mentioned it to me, I figured it out. It was you, wasn't it? I don't know what to think. Part of me is so grateful. This scholarship means I can actually go to college, that I don't have to worry about money or loans or working 3 jobs. It means I can study music, like you said I should. But part of me is scared. Why did you do this? What do you want from me? I need to talk to you. Can we meet somewhere private? I don't want anyone to see us together. I don't want people to get the wrong idea. I'll be at my spot on Saturday afternoon at 2:30. You know where I mean, please come. Cassandra. You read the letter 3 times. It was never sent. Cassandra must have called Robert instead, like Linda said. But the letter reveals what she was thinking, what she was feeling. Gratitude, confusion, fear. And it reveals that she knew. She knew about the scholarship. She knew Robert Fane had done something for her that crossed a line, even if he didn't mean it that way. Part 24, Detective Marsh. You try to find Detective William Marsh, the officer who led the original investigation. It takes some digging, but you eventually learn that he retired in 2005 and now lives in a small town about an hour from Millbrook. You call him, and to your surprise, he agrees to meet you. Marsh is in his late 70s, with a weathered face and a gravelly voice. You meet him at a diner near his home. He orders coffee and listens as you explain what you found. The journal entries, the scholarship, the letter, Linda Fane's admission that her husband lied about his alibi. When you finish, Marsh is silent for a long time. Then he says, I knew Fane was lying. Why didn't you arrest him? Because I had no evidence. No body, no witnesses, no physical proof that he did anything wrong. His wife gave him an alibi, and even if she was lying, I couldn't prove it. The DA wouldn't touch the case without more. But you suspected him. Of course I did. Everything pointed to him. The relationship, the scholarship, the phone call that morning. But suspicion isn't enough. I needed something concrete. You ask what he thinks happened. Marsh stirs his coffee. I think Fane went to meet Cassandra at that clearing. I think they talked. Maybe she confronted him about the scholarship. Maybe she told him she felt uncomfortable, that she thought his help had strings attached. And maybe he got defensive or angry. Maybe things escalated. And then he killed her. Accidentally or on purpose, I don't know. But I think he buried her somewhere nearby, somewhere he knew no one would look. And then he went home and lied to his wife and to me. You ask if Marsh ever searched the area around Oakwood Avenue. We searched the woods. We brought in dogs, but the field was enormous and we didn't have the resources for a full excavation. After a few weeks, the department moved on. There were other cases, other priorities. Marsh looks at you across the table. You're not going to solve this, you know. Even if everything you found is true, Fain is dead. Linda Fain is the only one who can confirm his alibi was fake, and she's not going to change her story now. Cassandra's body is still out there somewhere if it hasn't been completely destroyed by time. All you're going to do is dredge up old pain for Alina Voss. She deserves to know the truth. Maybe, but what's the truth? That her daughter trusted the wrong person. That a man she respected and thanked for helping her daughter might have killed her. You think that's going to bring Alina peace? You don't have an answer. Part 25, The Search. You go back to Oakwood Avenue with a shovel and a metal detector you rented from a hardware store. You're not sure what you're looking for, but you have to try. The clearing with the old foundation is easy to find now that you know it's there. You start at the edge of the clearing and work your way inward, sweeping the metal detector back and forth. For the first hour, you find nothing but old nails and a few bottle caps. Then, near the northwest corner of the foundation, the detector beeps. You kneel down and start digging. The soil is soft, damp. About 6 inches down, your shovel hits something hard. You dig more carefully now, using your hands to clear away the dirt. It's a metal box, rusted and dented. You lift it out and pry open the lid. Inside, wrapped in a plastic bag, is a necklace. A simple silver chain with a small treble clef pendant. You sit back on your heels, holding the necklace. You remember the photograph on Alina's mantle, Cassandra's shy smile. You remember the concert program, her name next to Robert Fain's. You keep digging. Part 26, What the Ground Holds. It takes you 4 hours to find her. You dig carefully, methodically, expanding outward from where you found the necklace. The sun is setting when your shovel finally hits something that isn't dirt or rock. You stop and call the police. 2 officers arrive within 20 minutes. One of them is young, maybe in his late 20s, and looks uncomfortable. The other is older, a sergeant named Diaz. She takes one look at what you've uncovered, a shallow depression, bones just visible beneath the soil, and calls for backup. Within an hour, the clearing is full of people. Police, a forensic team, someone from the county coroner's office. They set up lights and tape off the area. You sit on the hood of your car, wrapped in a blanket someone gave you, and watch them work. Sergeant Diaz comes over to talk to you. You're the one who found her. Yes. How did you know to look here? You tell her everything. The tapes, the journal, the scholarship, Linda Fain's confession about the alibi. Diaz listens without interrupting. When you finish, she says, "We'll need to follow up on all of this. But for now, thank you. Alina Voss deserves to know what happened to her daughter." You ask if they can identify the remains. It'll take time, but if this is Cassandra Voss, we'll know soon enough, and we'll figure out what happened to her. You nod. You think about Robert Fain, dead for 20 years beyond justice. You think about Linda Fain, who lied to protect him and has lived with that lie ever since. You think about Alina, who will finally have an answer but not the one she hoped for. You think about Cassandra, 17 years old, buried in her secret place for 36 years. Part 27, Alina again. 3 weeks later, the DNA results come back. The remains are Cassandra Voss. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the skull, consistent with a fall or a blow from a heavy object. The coroner estimates she died within hours of her disappearance. You're the one who tells Alina. The police offered to do it, but you asked if you could be there. You owe her that much. Alina takes the news quietly. She sits on her couch, hands folded in her lap, and nods. "I knew," she says. "I've known for a long time, but knowing and having proof are different things." You tell her about Robert Fain, about the scholarship, about the meeting at the clearing. You tell her what you think happened, that Cassandra confronted him, that he got defensive or angry, that something went wrong. Alina listens. When you finish, she says, "He always seemed like such a kind man. I thanked him for helping her. I invited him to our house for dinner once. I had no idea." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You gave me answers. That's more than anyone else did." You ask if she's angry. "I don't know what I am. Sad mostly. Sad for Cassandra, for all the things she never got to do. Sad for myself, for all the years I spent hoping she was still alive somewhere. And yes, angry. Angry at Robert Fane for taking her from me. Angry at myself for not seeing it." "You couldn't have known." "Maybe, but I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why a teacher was so invested in my daughter. I should have." She stops, takes a breath. "It doesn't matter now, it's done." You sit with her in silence for a while. Outside, the afternoon is bright and cold. A neighbor is raking leaves. A dog barks in the distance. Millbrook continues, indifferent. Finally, Alina says, "Will you do something for me?" "Of course." "Will you make sure people remember her? Not just as the girl who disappeared, but as who she was. She was smart and kind, and she loved music. She deserved better than this." You promise that you will. Part 28, the article. You write it all down, not as a newspaper article or a police report, but as a narrative, a story. You write about Cassandra's life, her dreams, her love of music. You write about the scholarship, the secret meeting, the teacher she trusted. You write about Alina's decades of waiting, of not knowing. You write about the clearing in the field, the old foundation, the bones beneath the soil. You write about Robert Fane, too. Not as a monster, but as a man who made a terrible mistake. A man who crossed boundaries he shouldn't have crossed, who let his admiration for a student become something more complicated. A man who, in a moment of panic or anger or fear, did something he couldn't take back. You don't publish the story. Instead, you print it out and give it to Alina. She reads it over the course of an evening, sitting in her living room with a cup of tea. When she finishes, she calls you. "Thank you," she says. "This is how I want people to remember her." You ask if she wants you to share it more widely, maybe with the Historical Society or the local paper. "No," she says. "Let's keep it private, just between us. Cassandra's story doesn't need to be public. It's enough that someone finally listened." Part 29, the tapes. You return the tapes to the Historical Society, along with copies of your notes and the article you wrote. Mrs. Herrera files them carefully, labels them, adds them to the archive. "These will be here if anyone ever needs them," she says. "History doesn't disappear, it just waits." You think about Dennis Kowalski, about his determination to find answers, his frustration when he couldn't. You think about how he would have felt if he'd known the truth, if he'd been able to give Alina closure. You think about how he carried this case with him, how it stayed in his mind even after he left Millbrook. You wonder if he'll carry it too. Part 30, the listener. It's late December now. You're still in Millbrook, still working at the Historical Society, still cataloging photographs and documents. But something has changed. You're more careful now, more attentive. You listen to the voices in the archive, on tapes, in letters, in old newspaper clippings, and you hear the stories they're trying to tell. You think about Cassandra Voss often, about her voice, which you never heard but can imagine, clear and hopeful, full of possibility, about the future she was supposed to have, the life she was supposed to live, about how quickly it all ended on a cold February afternoon in a clearing that was supposed to be safe. You think about Alina, too, about how she survived 36 years of not knowing, of hopping and grieving in equal measure, about how she's surviving still, now that she knows. One evening, you're walking home from the Historical Society when you pass the high school. Choir practice is letting out and students are streaming through the doors, laughing and talking, their breath visible in the cold. One girl, maybe 17, walks past you carrying a folder of sheet music. She's humming to herself, lost in thought. You watch her disappear down the street and you think, this is what Cassandra should have had. This ordinary moment, this ordinary life. This chance to walk home on a winter evening, humming a melody, thinking about the future. You can't give that back to her. No one can, but you can do what Alina asked. You can remember her. You can make sure she wasn't just a case file or a cold statistic. You can make sure someone listened. And you did. Epilogue, January 2026. It's been 2 months since they found Cassandra's remains. The story made the news for a few days, a brief flurry of articles and TV segments, but it faded quickly. There were no arrests, no trial, no dramatic conclusion, just an old tragedy finally explained. Linda Fain gave a brief statement to the police, confirming that her husband had lied about his whereabouts on February 13, 1988. She expressed remorse for her role in the cover-up, but maintained that her husband never admitted to harming Cassandra. The police closed the case as solved, with Robert Fain identified as the likely perpetrator. There's no one left to charge. Alina Voss held a small funeral for her daughter, just a few people, old friends, a cousin from out of state, Paul Greaves from the library. You attended, standing in the back, listening as Alina spoke about Cassandra's love of music, her kindness, her dreams. Afterward, Alina thanked you again. You gave her back to me, she said. I can finally let her rest. You've been thinking about that phrase, let her rest. You wonder if that's what you've done, or if you've just shifted the burden from one set of shoulders to another. You've given Alina answers, but answers aren't the same as peace. You're still in Millbrook. You've extended your contract with the Historical Society for another year. Mrs. Herrera seems pleased. The grant work is progressing well and you've become good at your job, organizing archives, preserving voices, making sure the past doesn't disappear entirely. But sometimes late at night you take out the cassette tapes and listen to them again. Dennis Kowalski's voice steady and determined, Alina Voss's voice hollow with grief, Jennifer Hartley's voice young and uncertain, Robert Fain's voice smooth and careful. You listen to them and you think about how many stories are buried in places like Millbrook, how many mysteries remain unsolved, how many people vanish without explanation, how many families wait for answers that never come. You think about how lucky Alina was in the end, not to have her daughter back, but to know, to have that one terrible certainty. Outside your window, snow is starting to fall. The streetlights cast orange halos in the darkness. Millbrook is quiet, as it always is at this hour. You can hear the distant sound of a snowplow, the creak of the building settling. You turn off the tape player and sit in silence. Tomorrow, you'll go back to the archive. You'll catalog more photographs, organize more files, preserve more voices. You'll listen carefully, the way you've learned to listen. And if another story emerges from the boxes and tapes and forgotten documents, you'll be ready. You'll always be ready. Because someone has to listen. Someone has to remember. Someone has to make sure that the people who disappeared aren't forgotten, that their stories continue, that their voices, however faint, however distant, are heard. That's your job now. You are the listener, and you will keep listening for as long as it takes.